Hello everyone. In today's video you will hear the impressive story of Ilaria Wren, a woman who died for a few minutes and had an overwhelming spiritual experience. She was taken to a kingdom of light, encountered Christ, and received shocking revelations about the future of humanity and the arrival of a system of global control. What she saw will leave you speechless. So leave a like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and comment below which city you are watching. We want to know how far this message will reach. Get ready. What comes next is powerful. I never liked noisy mornings. I always thought the world should wake up calmly, like the sun slipping through the curtains. That Tuesday, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the autumn chill that came in through the half-open window. I wore my flowery blue apron, the same as always, and stirred a pot of porridge while I wondered if Caleb would remember. It was our wedding anniversary. 14 years. He probably wouldn't remember. That's when I felt it. First, a slight twinge in the chest. I ignored it. Then, a pressure, as if an invisible wall was pushing from the inside out. The spoon fell from my hand and clanked on the tile floor. I held both hands to my chest, trying to breathe. There was no air. Just pain. A lot of pain. Caleb! I tried to scream, but my voice was weak, muffled. I crawled over to the landline telephone on the wall. I barely managed to dial 911. I remember hearing the dispatcher's voice, distant like a whisper in a tunnel. "Emergency, where are you?" was all I heard before my legs gave out. The floor felt cold and padded at the same time. A tremor ran through my body. My eyes burned and a tear fell involuntarily. I tried to think of some prayer, but I couldn't even form that. Everything slowed down. The noise of the wind stopped. The breathing of the world stopped. I knew. There, on my kitchen floor, between the overturned pan and the spoon on its side, I was dying. I didn't feel scared, which is a strange thing to say. It was as if something told me that everything was in order even when it wasn't. My fingers started to tingle. My eyelids felt heavy. The phone slipped out of his hand. The last thing I heard was the sound of sirens, far away. Then, just silence. Living silence. As if the world for a moment had held its breath along with me. The first thing I noticed was the lightness. It was as if I had taken off a heavy jacket I had worn for years without realizing it. The pain was gone. The pressure in his chest was gone. When I opened my eyes, or what felt like my eyes, I was no longer on the kitchen floor. He was above, floating. I saw my body down there, stretched out with my blonde hair spread like threads of gold on the white floor. 2 paramedics had already entered. One of them, wearing blue gloves, was pressing my chest with rhythmic force, while the other was preparing something in a hurry. I heard muffled voices. Unstable heart rhythm. "Let's go with the defibrillator," but the sounds came as if from underwater, distant, unreal. I wanted to scream that I was there, that they could stop, that I was no longer in pain. But there was no voice. There were only presence and peace. A soft, bright light began to emerge from the kitchen ceiling. It wasn't white, it was pulsating, as if breathing, as if you were waiting for me. As soon as it wrapped around me, I was pulled away. No effort, no fear. The speed increased, but I felt no wind or acceleration. It was like going through the very memory of the world. A tunnel opened, not dark, but vibrant, with colors that danced and intertwined like veils floating on water. During the crossing, my life flashed before me, but not like a rushed film. Every moment was filled with sense. I saw my first day of school. The time I lied to my mom about a broken vase. The day Caleb held my hand in the hospital when I lost our first baby. Each memory came with an emotional revelation, where I loved, where I failed, where I could have done differently, and, interestingly, where I was loved without even realizing it. I felt like I wasn't being judged. It was being shown, as if a silent voice said to me, Look, Ilaria. See with the eyes of the soul. Then the tunnel started to open, and on the other side, an even more intense light awaited me. A light that knew my name before I was born. The light that awaited me at the end of the tunnel was not just intense, it was alive. He felt like a hug before he even touched her. When I emerged, I was enveloped by a warm, almost maternal presence. The air there, if it was air, vibrated with a tone of love so deep that it made me cry without tears. Then they began to emerge. First vague shapes like silhouettes made of liquid light, then slowly they gained shape. Familiar faces, bright eyes that looked through me with tenderness. My grandmother Ruth was the first to reveal herself. Her face was, younger, softer, but her smile, that smile that only she had, was exactly the same. "You were always stronger than you thought, my girl," she said, but not with words. It was as if each syllable was born inside my heart. I ran to her, or I thought I ran, for there was no ground beneath my feet. We hugged, and his touch was made of warmth and memory. Others came. Uncles, distant friends, even a co-worker who had died years ago in an accident. And surprisingly, a man I hadn't seen since childhood, the janitor at the school where I studied, Mr. He had never said more than good morning, and yet now he looked at me with a love that dismantled me. "Small gestures echo in eternity," he told me. They all radiated peace, joy, a higher awareness of something I still barely understood. We were all connected. Our lives, our pains, our encounters, nothing was by chance. One of the light beings approached closer. Its glow was golden and soft. I didn't recognize the face, but what I felt was profound. He reached out his hand to me, and in the touch came a rush of knowledge. He had prayed for me. For years. In silence. Without me knowing. There, on that plane, the barriers of time and logic did not exist. Only love remained. Only the eternal had weight. I was at home, but it wasn't over yet. The light in the background began to open, and a presence greater than anything I had felt approached. The atmosphere began to change, not abruptly, but like when the sky changes before a storm. Only instead of fear, I felt reverence. The beings of light around me fell silent. Some walked away sweetly. Others just bowed in deep humility. One of them whispered inside me, "He's coming." And then he came. A golden light, intense but soft like the touch of a warm breeze, formed in front of me. Little by little, that light took the shape of a man of absolute presence. He was not tall or short, young or old. It simply was. And in his gaze there was something that I will never be able to describe in human words. My knees buckled on their own. There was no way to remain upright before him. Christ. I didn't need an introduction. You knew. My spirit recognized. Him as the Creator, the Beloved, the Redeemer, not as a distant figure from church paintings, but as someone who was always with me, on good days, on silent ones, and especially on the worst. His eyes met mine, and there, without words, he showed me everything he always wanted to tell me. I saw myself as I really was, fragile, loved, imperfect, precious. There was no trial. There was clarity. He reached out his hand, and as he touched it, a heat shot through my being, and I was overcome by something I can only call a feeling of living truth. My spiritual body trembled. I knew that would change everything. And then, without speaking, he communicated to me, "What you will see now is real, and you will come back. You must tell." I felt resistance inside me. I didn't want to go back. How could I? How to explain this? How to support it? But he looked at me with firmness and love. "It's not about you. It's about them." And in that instant I realized that was a mission. The scenery around us has transformed. Peace gave way to dense silence. Christ's face still shone, but now there was urgency in his gaze. A new vision was about to begin. The light around him began to darken, not with shadows, but with a heaviness. It was as if eternity enveloped me in silence, so that I listened what could not be said with sounds. Christ's presence was still with me, but now he stood beside me like a silent guide. The scene appeared before us as if time itself were a veil being torn apart. I saw the earth, not like a globe, but like a vast living tapestry. I saw continents, cities, crowds in despair. There was chaos, lots of chaos. Natural disasters, buildings collapsing, rivers overflowing. I saw financial markets collapsing, people running in panic with useless papers in their hands. Fear was the new currency. And then, something was offered to the world. A system, a global solution. It was presented as the only way to restore order. International leaders, familiar faces, politicians, artists, even religious people, spoke in unison about the need for a new universal pact. On the screen of a gigantic square, someone said, "To have peace, we need control. To have security, we need identification." And then I saw a brand. She wasn't just a symbol, she wasn't just a chip or a code. She was spiritual. I saw people receiving it with relief, as if it brought peace. But his eyes went dark. It was like seeing souls being sealed with silence. Some received it by hand, others on the forehead. In both cases, there was a choice. Christ showed me the spiritual behind the scenes. I saw dark entities rejoicing as multitudes accepted the mark without question. I saw religious leaders stretching out their hands and saying, "This isn't against God, it's just adaptation." But the whole sky cried. The brand was not just about economic control, was loyalty. An exchange, physical security in exchange for spiritual submission to the Antichrist. I saw a woman hesitate before accepting. She looked at her hungry children and then held out her hand. I cried, but he chose. Christ said to me, "They will think they choose life, but they will be choosing the death of the Spirit." I was shaking, and he knew what came next was even darker. The visions continued like waves, one after another. Christ stood by my side, unwavering as the scene before me transformed. Now I saw futuristic cities, but not as progress, but as golden prisons. Everything was clean, organized, technological, and empty. People walked like automatons. Their faces were serene, but their eyes were dull. I saw digital gates that opened only with eye scans or biometric taps. Every transaction, every movement, every word was monitored. Total security. System, said the announcements that echoed in the streets like mantras. Buy with the palm of your hand. Control your identity with a single tap. Be a model citizen, gain more access. I saw codes being inserted directly into the body. They didn't seem painful, in fact, they were even desirable. It was fashion, it was advancement, it was freedom. But in the spiritual realm, I saw the opposite. Invisible chains formed on the wrists and foreheads of those who accepted the system. Chains that didn't pull, but paralyzed. And then I saw something even more perverse: social credit. Citizens had scores floating around them. These scores defined whether they could enter hospitals, buy food, travel. But these grades were not based on criminal behavior. They were based on adherence to the system, in words spoken, opinions expressed, even prayers said out loud. A woman was demoted because she mentioned the name of Jesus in a public conversation. A man was prevented from buying medicine because he had participated in a secret prayer group. The system disguises itself as progress, but it is prison. Christ communicated to me, sadly. I saw children being taught in schools to fear faith. I saw pastors being replaced by artificial intelligences that reinterpreted the scriptures to suit the new regime. Everything looked peaceful on the outside. But inside, I saw God's presence was being systematically withdrawn from the earth. And yet the many didn't understand. The mark is not just an outward seal. It is an inward surrender, Christ told me. And the world, thirsty for stability, was ready to surrender completely. What I saw next tore me apart inside. Christ showed me families, divided. I saw a common dining table, a father, a mother, and 2 teenage children. The food was set out, but no one was smiling. The television in the background broadcast the same repeated message. The brand is for your good. Without it, you don't exist. The father had the brand, the mother too. But the eldest daughter, with steady, bright eyes, refused. "I can't accept it," she said, her voice trembling. "That doesn't come from God." The father stood up, furious. "Then you are no longer part of our house." The mother cried in silence, trying to convince her daughter. "Please, darling, it's just a code. You won't get work or food, you'll be persecuted." The girl walked away from the table, carrying only an old Bible in her hands. This scene was repeated in infinite variations. Brothers against brothers, husbands denouncing their wives, children betraying parents. And it wasn't just in homes. I saw companies demanding the brand as a condition for employment, schools forcing students to accept to maintain their enrollment, hospitals denying care to those who were not compliant with the system. Christ showed me faces, hundreds, thousands, everyone in crisis, and each of them had the same question in their eyes. If I refuse, will I survive? I saw many giving in, not out of malice, but out of fear, from exhaustion, by pressure. I saw churches adapting, creating new doctrines to justify accepting the brand. I saw pastors saying, "God doesn't want you to go hungry. He will understand." But Christ whispered to my soul, "Not everyone who says, 'Lord, Lord,' to me knows me. Discernment will be the greatest weapon." The choice for the brand would not be accidental. He would be conscious, even if disguised. A choice between divine sovereignty and the false security of the system. And the voices in the world would be many. High, insistent, dangerously convincing. I saw a giant billboard with the phrase, "Love takes care. Accept the mark." But in invisible letters engraved in the mind of those who read were the words, "True love is free, and it's being erased." The pain wasn't just on the streets or in the systems. Christ led me to see inside churches. The place that once was a refuge was now divided. I saw luxurious pulpits where elegant pastors preached messages of peace, prosperity, and unity. But there was something strange about their words. They spoke of love, but without the cross. They spoke of light, but without regret. They talked about God, but they didn't talk about Christ. In one of the visions, a woman stood up during a service and said out loud, "This is not the gospel. They are denying repentance. They are denying the sacrifice." She was removed by the church's own security. The members, who would once have cried and prayed with her, just looked at her indifferently. Christ showed me religious leaders sincerely deceived, believing they were doing good by supporting the system. I saw meetings between large denominations, sealing agreements with political entities in the name of global peace. A man with tired eyes and a firm voice said, "The unity of humanity is more important than religious dogmas." And at that moment, a scripture flashed before me, as if the sky itself cried out, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Believers who did not seek real intimacy with God were being easily manipulated. Many followed charismatic leaders without question. The scriptures were reinterpreted by artificial intelligences that removed verses considered offensive or exclusive. And Christ said, "Those who do not know my voice will be carried away by the wind of deception." I even saw children being taught that Jesus was just a historical guide, and that his true message was harmony with the system. Families that once prayed together were now separated by spiritual convictions. Husbands called their wives fanatics. Children laughed at their parents' faith. And yet, in the midst of the deception, there was light. Small groups, hidden, gathered reverently. They prayed in silence. They studied the word in secret. And when they spoke, their words had fire. They weren't many, but they were true. And Christ showed me these would be the seeds of resistance. After the deception in the churches, the scenario changed. The sky darkened over the world I saw, but it wasn't night. It was as if something had been removed from the earth, something that previously protected like a veil of mercy. And then he appeared. At first, just a name, then a face, a young man with a serene and magnetic appearance. His eyes were like mirrors, bright, deep, and cold. He spoke eloquently, with a calm that mesmerized crowds. His words came as a balm for the wounds of the world. I bring unity. I bring healing. I bring the new era. And the nations, they bowed before him. I saw an immense dome, like a world assembly. Leaders of different faiths and cultures were there, pledging their universal vision. There was applause, tears, celebrations. I even saw ancient religious people, us who used to be so conservative, handing over symbols of their faith, saying, "We are ready for a new beginning." But on the spiritual plane, Christ showed me the truth. I saw the man stand before a multitude and receive like an invisible crown the adoration of millions. Behind him, a gigantic shadow was forming. It was a being without a defined form, made of living darkness, which accompanied him like a second skin. He will come as a lamb, but he will be a wolf, Christ said. I saw miracles, fake miracles happen. People being healed, catastrophes being avoided, crises resolved. Everything seemed perfect. But the essence of that man was rebellion against God. He didn't force, he enchanted. His power was in seduction, not by force. He offered everything the world wanted: peace, healing, prosperity, in exchange for disguised adoration. I saw crowds singing in stadiums. United we are one name, one kingdom, one leader. But each voice was a soul selling its truth. And Christ said to me with pain in his eyes, "He will not take with violence, he will receive with joy, for many will desire him more than me." It was there that I understood. The real war would not be physical. It would be from the heart. I saw the world divided, torn apart, surrounded by deception, but I also saw the light resisting. Christ showed me small groups scattered everywhere: deserts, caves, forests, forgotten cellars. They weren't many, but their hearts were on fire. These people did not have access to the system. They lived on the margins, without comfort, without guarantees, but with genuine faith. With each prayer, the spiritual atmosphere around them lit up. It was as if each word broke through the darkness. A thin woman with a baby in her arms prayed in a soft voice, "Even if I die, may my soul never deny your name." I saw secret miracles happening among them. Water springing from rocks, food multiplying, children cured without doctors. There was no show, there were no cameras, and just total dependence on God. And then Christ said to me, "They are the ones who have not bowed. They are like torches in the dark, and their testimony will awaken those who still sleep." I wanted to stay longer. I wanted to keep watching. But a force began to pull me. The surrounding spiritual scenery faded, dissolved into light. Christ looked at me once more. His face was love and authority. "Now you know. Now you come back, and you must tell." Everything around me spun in silence. The light withdrew. I felt a pull, strong, direct, as if my soul was being sucked back into my flesh. A violent breath, a cold shock. I opened my eyes with difficulty. There were machines beeping. Human voices. Weight. Gravity. I was back. But it would never be the same. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.